Hello everyone, and welcome back to Fan X Fiction. Today we're going to be reading The Royal Hunt by Too Many J's. Chapter 2, The Ruins Part 1. A few days earlier, Frisk could feel the hot evening sunlight resting on her sleeping face. She was currently in a weird state where she was not quite asleep, but not really awake either, like her consciousness was stuck in a limbo of sorts. A small part of her didn't want to wake up just yet. She had been dreaming a good dream. Frisk couldn't remember what it was about, just that it had been very good, and hoped that if she would fall asleep again, it would pick up right where she started, wherever that was. When Frisk finally opened her eyes, she was almost blinded for a moment by the light of the orange evening sun, until she quickly adjusted to it. Still too tired to stand up, Frisk looked around and was laying in a bright and very brown underground cavern. Above her was the rocky platform where she had fallen, and where the only cavern entrance she knew of was located, with the setting sun shining through, giving bright colors to the otherwise dull place. She also had an immense headache. Perhaps the biggest headache she had gotten in a long time. Not only that, but she also felt very tired and all hungover. It was like she had been drinking all night, even though she remembered doing nothing of the sort.
Ugh, mierda.
Frisk cursed and put her hand on her forehead. After a short while, though, the headache and dizziness went away.
Maybe I knocked my head on something when I fell. Would explain why I suddenly fell asleep. That and the soft floor.
Frisk finally sat up and looked further at her surroundings. She had been laying on a small flower bed consisting only of sunflowers that formed almost a perfect circle right underneath the cavern entrance. The flowers were very soft indeed, perhaps unnaturally so. Frisk figured they must have lightened her fall. The next thing Frisk did was look down on her clothes. She was still wearing the same clothes as last she checked, a blue and pink striped hoodie with dangling white laces, blue torn jeans, and black matching boots. In other words, there was nothing that seemed out of the ordinary there. Frisk found it weird that she considered checking. Frisk groaned a bit when she stood up. After that, she began to listen to her surroundings. Birds were singing, insects were buzzing in this underground cavern, and from somewhere far above, Frisk could hear the distant sound of an early autumn wind, which gave her images of being inside a nice, cozy cabin during an extreme wind. It was like she had fallen into a fairy tale. But as much as the peaceful atmosphere fancied her, another growing part of her was filled with dread. She had fallen God knows how deep, and she was now possibly trapped. Starting to panic, Frisk looked up at the platform from where she had fallen and began to yell.
Help! Anyone?
There was no reply.
Hey, there's a girl stuck down here. I fell down this hole. I can't get up. If there's anyone up there that can help me, that'd be great.
There was no reply, but the distant chirping of birds. Frisk waited for a few moments, but still, there came nothing. Frisk sighed.
What are you doing, Frisk?
She asked herself. She reached for her pant pocket and pulled out a small white phone.
What the hell?
She said when she opened it and saw the red glowing notification on her screen. There was no signal, none at all. Frisk found this more surprising as much as it worried her. She had fallen far, yes, but Frisk was sure she hadn't fallen that far. And it wasn't like the mountain was a long way away from a decent signal tower. In fact, there was one right on top of it. Thinking it was a bug or some badly optimized settings, Frisk's next move was to see if she could fix it herself. She went through all the settings she could find. She went through the Wi-Fi, the mobile data, and even the phone's memory to see if it was full or something.
Come on.
She muttered as she scrolled through the settings.
Shit.
It was useless. Try as she might, she just couldn't reactivate it.
Damn it.
Giving up, frustrated and worried, Frisk put the phone back into her pockets. Her breath began to grow frantic. She was starting to panic. But she knew that a panic attack wouldn't do anything but make things feel worse, so she began to close her eyes and calm herself down.
Don't freak out. Just breathe slowly. It's not that bad. You're just trapped in an underground cavern far away from civilization, and no one has any idea where you are. You know, just typical teenage worries.
She breathed calmly for a few moments, and when she considered herself ready, she opened her eyes again as slowly as she closed them, and began to look around for a way out. Despite her ever-growing worry, Frisk stayed determined and tried her hardest not to let the panic overwhelm her.
All right. Think.
She considered maybe trying to climb up, but then she quickly changed her mind as she remembered she was a terrible climber. Also, the cavernous walls seemed to concave at the top, making it impossible to climb without the proper tools.
Maybe I could... No. That's stupid.
And then Frisk finally noticed it. It was pretty hard to see at first because it was hidden in the shadows, but Frisk could faintly see a tunnel entrance deeper with the cavern.
Okay. This could be it.
With that, she turned back to face the platform where she had fallen, and yelled at it one last time.
You know what? It's fine. I think I found a way out of here myself. Turns out I might not need your help or anything.
Once again, there was no reply.
Great job, Frisk. Yelling at nothing. It's got to be the first sign of crazy.
With that, she turned to face the tunnel.
Could be a dead end. Might as well try.
Since the path ahead was hidden from any visible source of light, it was extremely hard to see. But thanks to modern technology, Frisk simply picked up her phone and turned on the flashlight in it. When she did, however, Frisk was greeted by a curious sight. Frisk blinked twice, then a few more times just to make sure it wasn't a trick of the eye. But it was there, as hard as it was for her to believe. There were pillars. Stone pillars carved on the rocky walls. This couldn't have been any geological coincidence, as the craftsmanship was obviously handmade. Not only that, but they also looked incredibly similar to the ones found in ancient Greek temples, which kinda didn't fit with the whole Celtic or even medieval architecture Frisk would have normally expected to find in ruins this far north. To make extra sure she wasn't hallucinating, Frisk went and caressed one pillar, and felt the smoothly carved details. At one point, she no longer had any doubts. This was a real pillar. Frisk found this discovery confusing, as well as she had found it fascinating. If this place was as ancient as it seemed, why in the world hadn't she heard of it in all her years of living near this mountain? And why wasn't there anything put in place to preserve this ancient history? It wasn't like Mount Ebott was that far away from civilization, which would have made it impossible to find. In fact, the town where she lived, aptly named Ebott as well, was only a short drive away. The only explanation Frisk could think of, although it was very improbable, was that she was the only person who had found it so far. Unless the people who went missing at the mountain during all those years also found it, which would have meant they also fell down here. And Frisk would soon find out what happened to them. Frisk shook away those horrible thoughts and tried to stay optimistic. Whatever the reason, it didn't matter to her as much as finding a way out, and so she stepped away from the pillar and continued her descent.
Hello?
She yelled into the tunnel.
Anyone here? Any crazy hermits? Any wise old monks that can give me valuable life lessons? Any scary trolls or monsters that are going to eat me up? No? All right then.
The signs of ancient civilizations didn't fade the further she went. Rather, they increased exponentially as the rocky, cavernous walls were subtly replaced by solid and smoothly carved stone. After a short while, the place became indistinguishable from a large ancient hallway.
Okay, this is getting weird.
After about a minute of walking, the hallway ended at a solid wall, with the only way to continue being a large, open entrance to Frisk's left, with a dim light shining through. Like the pillars, it was obviously man-made and masterfully crafted, and it looked like it used to be a large gate, except the doors were missing. Around this open gate were carvings that seemed to depict some sort of ancient history, but they were now completely illegible after centuries, if not millennia of aging. The source of the dim light came from a sun shaft somewhere far above, and it was built so that the sunlight shone straight down like it was a pillar of light. But Frisk's curious wonder at this hidden relic of a bygone age was nothing compared to what she would find next when she finally decided to wander through the entrance and become witness to a sight that left her almost speechless.
What the hell is this place?
Cavern would no longer be the correct term for this place. A temple would be a closer descriptor at this point. A massive, beautiful temple, in which this one open room Frisk stood in could fit a 3-story building and still have enough room for dozens of people in it. The temple was built like a large dome, very reminiscent of Hagia Sophia. And at the top where the curved walls connected, there was a small hole where sunlight shone through and illuminated the entire garden. The architecture in this place, that being the curved walls and tall pillars, seemed like they were directly stolen from ancient Greek buildings and even had some hints of old Tibetan monasteries. This marvelous vista made Frisk gasp in astonishment. How no one had found this place before, especially in this current age of constant communication or surveillance. She couldn't for the life of her figure it out.
This is incredible. I must have stumbled upon some sort of archaeological gold mine. If I ever get out of here, this shit will make me famous.
Then she stopped looking up and looked at the ground ahead of her when she finally saw it. The strange objects that stood right underneath the shaft on the roof. The object in question wasn't anything Frisk hadn't seen before, or even anything completely out of place, but rather, it was the placement of it and the utter mundanity that made it stand out so much. It was a single sunflower in a pot, just sitting there. Finding this immensely curious, Frisk went closer to it and crouched down right in front of it. For the most part, it looked like an ordinary sunflower, not unlike the ones from the flower bed earlier, but this one seemed much fresher and healthier compared to the other ones. Whoever lived down here, Frisk figured, as it was no longer any question to her whether someone did, must have favored this single sunflower above the other ones for some reason or another.
Someone must have placed it here. But who the hell would do that, and why?
For a second, Frisk felt she saw a face in the pistol. Then she looked closer, and there was nothing. Frisk simply ignored it as a simple mirage.
Huh? Weird.
Don't touch him!
What?
Before Frisk could finish that sentence, a swath of flame suddenly burst out from the shadows like a dragon breathing fire.
Oh, shit.
A small fire landed to her side, but it was enough to almost throw her away. She quickly stood back on her feet and began to run.
Stop!
It sounded deep and masculine, like it belonged to an old man with a great sense of authority.
Come back here!
Frisk felt her fight or flight instinct kick in as she began to frantically run. She didn't have a plan on which direction. She just wanted to escape. Unfortunately, she didn't get very far, so she put all her thought on getting away. She didn't focus one bit on the ground, and then quickly tumbled down after her foot hit a rock.
Fuck.
Although the ground was mostly soft, her head still hurt when she fell headfirst into it. Her mind became dizzy from the pain. Her head didn't suffer the worst, though, unlike her knee, which unluckily landed on another set of rocks and caused her perhaps the biggest pain she ever felt so far. Fortunately for her, though, the adrenaline in her system dulled the affliction somewhat, and Frisk promptly resumed her escape, or at least she attempted to. She tried to stand up, only for her to immediately fall right back down again. She realized the wound on her leg seemed worse than she first thought, as Frisk found it impossible to even keep balance on it. Realizing she couldn't run, Frisk began to frantically crawl instead. The fires seemed to come from every direction. She didn't care where she was going, or even that she couldn't stand. Frisk just wanted to get away from the screaming voice and countless fires. But then her path became obstructed when a sudden wall of flame formed in front of her. Too frightened to question the logic of it, she turned on her back and saw someone standing in front of her. Someone whom Frisk could only assume was the person who attacked her. She couldn't get a clear look at this person as he stood in the shadows, but Frisk could still see a faint outline of him due to the 2 fireballs in his hands, which Frisk simply assumed were 2 little flamethrowers. The figure was of an immensely tall build, and was wearing what looked like a long, tall robe, complete with a long, fluffy beard and horns? Frisk didn't think much of the last part. She was too busy panicking.
Jesus Christ, mister, I'm sorry.
Sorry? Why should I believe you were sorry? Now tell me, what were you gonna do to him?
Nothing, I swear.
Frisk said, not really noticing the figure referring to the flower as him.
Liar!
I swear to fucking Christ, I wasn't doing anything. I simply just went closer to take a look at it. That's all I did, I swear.
The flames in the shadows began to wane a little. The silhouette then seemed to turn to look at the flower in the pot for a moment, before turning back to Frisk.
You weren't going to harm him?
The voice sounded a lot calmer this time, and Frisk felt she could hear a tinge of regret in it.
No. Why the hell should I? I don't even care about your stupid flower.
The figure became uncomfortably silent.
Stupid?
Ah, shit.
But instead of a fit of rage as Frisk expected, the figure just gave out an amusing chuckle.
My child, I understand your immediate dismissal of him. He may not look that much, but I assure you that he's not merely a stupid flower. In fact, he's arguably the complete opposite. This flower is my son.
Frisk's utter terror was almost replaced by a sudden confusion.
What? Your son? Holy shit, this guy really is crazy.
Frisk thought. Suddenly, all the flames in the room immediately dissipated as quick as turning off a light bulb. Frisk was so taken aback by it that she didn't even notice that the figure was now beginning to slowly but surely walk towards her, until she heard the large thumps coming from his massive feet. Realizing what he was doing, Frisk began to cower in fear. Judging by his unhinged nature, Frisk couldn't imagine what awful things this seemingly crazy person was possibly planning to do. But that fear was merely a fleeting moment compared to the absolute terror that came next, when she finally got a better look at this person, or rather, creature. The first thing that entered the light was a big paw. The paw was underneath a long robe, but it was so big, it practically stood out, and Frisk could almost see it in all its fluffy detail. It looked very much like a lion's paw, but the fur was white like a rabbit's or goat's. The next thing Frisk saw of this immensely tall, yet skinny figure was the purple flowing robe, which she could now see was extremely torn and dirty. It must have smelled as foul as it looked. Then came the uncannily human-like hands, and like the paws, they were white and fluffy, and the fingernails were extremely long. Frisk then saw the dirty and unkempt yellow beard that dangled on the robe, reminiscent of an old fantasy wizard. Then at last came the head, a crowning centerpiece that sent shivers to Frisk's spine, as it made her realize she was looking at a creature unlike anything she had ever seen in her entire life. The head was far from humanoid. Unlike its hands, it was a lot more animalistic like its paws. The closest animal resemblance Frisk could think of was a goat, due to the long white horns and dangling white ears. Yet, the head also had the semblance of a lion, with the giant golden beard that looked a bit like a mane, and the goat-looking muzzle also looked a bit feline. The strangest thing about it, though, was the eyes, which was also the only part of the creature that didn't resemble any animals Frisk could think of, but they were almost completely human-like. One blue, one orange, and both wide open. Underneath them were dark marks, like that of a person who hadn't slept in a long time. The creature looked at Frisk, not seeming to notice her frightened state, and gave an uncomfortable smile on its muzzle, similar to one of a person who had long forgotten how to be empathetic.
Howdy. I'm so sorry, I didn't know.
Ah!
The smile on the creature faded and was replaced by a look of utter confusion.
I'm sorry?
Ah! What the fuck are you?
The creature looked behind in a state of confusion, and then back on Frisk.
Are you talking about me?
Of course I'm talking about you. What are you?
At this moment, the strange creature lightened up, as if he seemed to realize something.
I'm so sorry. It somehow slipped my mind that most humanity hasn't seen or heard about our kind for thousands of years.
What? Thousands of years? Your kind? Wait. There's more of you?
Of course. In fact, my kind are millions in numbers. Each of different shapes and sizes. We are practically an entire different life form. One made mostly of magic. You humans had a name for us that might sound familiar to you. You humans used to call us monsters.
Monsters? Magic? What?
These sudden barges of information made Frisk almost faint in confusion and shock. The creature noticed her state and seemed to be extremely worried.
Are you alright?
I'm fine. I'm fine. This is just too much. I need a breather.
All right, then.
The creature said, and a smile returned on his muzzle.
Let's talk about something else. What is your name, little one?
What? Why?
Just curious.
Frisk looked at him for a few moments. She found it hard to bring herself back to an ordinary conversation with this creature, while it just stood there patiently and smiled. Eventually, though, Frisk managed to resume some train of thought.
Francisca. My name's Francisca Esperanza Montgamero. My friends just call me Frisk, though.
Frisk?
Frisk nodded in confirmation.
Well, that is a nice name. As for my name, what was my name again? Strange. I seem to have forgotten.
Frisk looked at him worryingly.
That's understandable.
Thankfully for her, the creature didn't seem to have noticed her semi-sarcastic tone.
I see you've already met my boy.
The nameless creature said and went towards the potted flower underneath the sun shaft. The immense barrage of information from the creature had Frisk almost completely forget about it.
But something tells me you haven't been properly introduced yet.
The creature said while he picked up the flower gently, like picking up a newborn.
He doesn't really have a name per se, but these days he goes by Flowey. As in Flowey the flower. Flowey, why don't you introduce yourself to your new friend over there?
The goat creature, smiling, stared at the plain-looking flower for a good few moments. Unless you count the flower moving slightly due to the wind that came from the opening above, nothing really happened. Meanwhile, Frisk stared at this bizarre moment, feeling a mixture of fright and confusion. Frisk wasn't sure if this kind of weird behavior that would be considered a sure sign of crazy for humans was completely ordinary for these monster creatures. After a few more moments of silence from the flower, the strange creature chuckled and looked back at Frisk reassuringly.
I think he's a bit shy. My son can be that sometimes, especially in the presence of strangers. I hope you understand me, but I'm not going to force him to talk to you if he doesn't feel like it, okay?
All right, then.
Suddenly, Frisk felt an immense pain in her leg where she fell. She didn't notice it at first because she was too busy being afraid, but now the pain was almost impossible to ignore. She tried to hide it from the monster because she was still a bit afraid of him, but it seemed to worsen with every moment. Frisk realized that she had failed when she noticed that the smile on the creature's muzzle seemed to fade and once again be replaced by a look of worry.
Are you all right, my child?
I'm fine,
said Frisk, and then winced in pain. The creature looked at her with a doubtful expression.
It doesn't seem fine. Don't worry, though. I think I know a way to make you feel better.
Still holding the flower, the creature began to walk towards Frisk. When Frisk noticed that he was coming towards her, she began to softly panic and crawled backwards.
Don't be afraid, child. I am not going to hurt you. Gods, I never would have attempted it if I had known any better.
He stopped when he was close enough so that he was practically standing over her, and Frisk saw just how tall and skinny he was. He was so skinny that Frisk could see the outlines of his bone in his anorexic-looking hands, and the robe seemed a few sizes too small for him. Then the creature began to carefully sit down as if his bones were incredibly fragile, which Frisk wouldn't be surprised by. Then he adjusted himself in a cross-legged position, and Frisk could feel his dirty, golden beard brushing her leg, and then laid the flower carefully to his side, and gently patted it on its head.
I haven't done this in a long time, to be honest,
he admitted while he stretched his clawed hands together, and Frisk could hear them crackling uncomfortably.
But I'm sure that I am just as good as I remember.
Then the creature outstretched his palms and let them hover shakingly over Frisk's wounded leg, like it was a warm furnace.
What are you doing?
You'll see.
The creature moved his hovered hands back and forth across Frisk's leg. Suddenly, Frisk felt a great warmth come from the creature's palm. That was not the strangest part, as Frisk discovered when she looked closer. Some green, alien-looking energy was coming from his clawed hand. Before Frisk could react, The energy had spread from the creature's fingertips like green strings, and it slithered worm-like all over Frisk's leg. Frisk began to freak out.
What do you...
Shh, child. Stay calm and this will be over much sooner.
Frisk didn't know what it was, whether it was the reassuring tone of his voice, a side effect of the green energy, or if she had mentally just given up on fighting. But Frisk found herself suddenly no longer resisting. The energy passed through the leather of her jeans, and then Frisk could feel its cool and tickling touch on her skin like dozens of wriggling worms. Then the green energy vanished in an instant, and the creature pulled back his hands.
There. All better now.
What did you just do to me?
I fixed you.
What?
Then Frisk felt it, or rather, didn't feel it. The pain in her leg was gone, and she realized that she was able to move it without any difficulty. She pulled up her pant leg and was shocked to find her suspicions confirmed. There was no wound, no marks, or anything that would have hinted that she had fallen. It was like she was never wounded at all.
My God. You fixed it. How did you... Wait, was that... magic?
Indeed.
Then his smile faded, and he immediately looked bewildered.
Wait, have you never seen magic before?
No. Where I'm from, up there, magic is basically a myth.
The creature looked at her like he couldn't imagine that kind of life in the slightest. Then he just chuckled, and his weird, somewhat creepy smile returned.
It's all right. You'll grow used to it.
I don't think I ever will.
Well, whatever the case, let's agree to disagree. Oh, pardon me, I must be going now. I just realized it's late, and my boy needs to be home for dinner.
Still holding the flower in the pot, the eccentric creature stood up and began to head towards another entrance that was further away, while Frisk just sat there, still trying to process everything that had happened. Halfway on its path, though, the creature stopped and turned around to look at Frisk.
Are you coming?
Frisk was a bit surprised by that question. This creature that she had not only just met, but who also just attacked her was now expecting her to follow him? Normally, Frisk would have absolutely refused following a stranger who had recently attacked her without a doubt. But as strange as it sounded, Frisk found this question difficult to answer. Not only was she lost, but she had learned so many things in these past few minutes that turned everything she knew, or rather, thought she knew, on its head. Suddenly, she was in a world of magic and strange creatures. In short, Frisk had a dilemma. The creature looked like it had lived in this place for a long time, judging by its tattering outfit and dirty look. So he must know it like the back of his hand, and thus could possibly know of a way out. But to say that Frisk wasn't scared of this so-called monster would be an understatement. She was frightened of the possibility that he would lead her to a hidden place so that he could eat her in peace. On the other hand, this creature, while obviously eccentric, appeared to be somewhat nice and seemed to be immensely regretful for attacking her earlier. But that could also just be because he's attempting to lead Frisk to a false sense of security. Whatever the case, she couldn't just stay in this temple forever, so she had to make a choice sooner or later. In the end, Frisk decided to take the risk.
Don't think I've got a choice.
She stood up and lightly dusted her clothes.
All right then, lead the way.